Welcome to Sleepy History Cafe. Tonight, we're stepping quietly into the past. The sounds of modern life, cars, phones, urgency, can be set aside for now. This is a space for slow stories and forgotten rhythms. A space where you can breathe a little deeper, blink a little slower, and drift gently back through time. Our journey tonight takes us to ancient Rome, a city of marble and smoke, sandals and stone. A city built not just on conquest, but on order, on ritual, and on a deep belief that the public and private must coexist, even when that means bathing with strangers. But don't worry, we won't rush. We'll ease our way through this historical landscape, beginning with the daily life of ordinary Romans and the very unglamorous experience of public hygiene. Later, we'll pause with a philosopher who started his life as a slave. We'll peer into the ash-covered silence of a doomed seaside town. And finally, we'll recline beside emperors, not too close, as they pick over gilded delicacies and sip wine laced with paranoia. This is not a tale of war or glory. It's a tale of warmth and weariness, of steam and silence, of lives lived and lost in the bathhouses and banquet halls of long ago. So settle in. Let your mind wander where it will. There's no need to stay alert. Just listen as we begin. Why you wouldn't last a day in a Roman public bath. Imagine yourself waking in a cramped, low-ceilinged Roman apartment, an insula, they called it. It's early, but the sun is already slanting in through the wooden shutters. You can hear the clatter of hooves in the street below, the barking of a dog, and someone shouting in crude Latin a few buildings over. The air is warm, even now, heavy with the scent of cooking oil, charcoal smoke, and the faint sourness of too many people living too close together. You haven't bathed in several days. This is not unusual. Soap, as we know it, hasn't quite made its way here. Instead, Romans clean themselves with oil. And today, you're going to the thermae, the public baths, to scrape away the sweat and grime. There is no private tub waiting for you, no gentle stream of warm water. Instead, you bring a small cloth bag, a flask of olive oil, and your strigil, a curved metal tool used to scrape dirt and oil from the skin. At the entrance, you pay a small coin. The bathhouse is buzzing. It's always busy this time of day. This isn't just a place to wash. It's a place to be seen, a place to gossip, to conduct business, to listen to recitations, to get a massage, to argue politics. You feel eyes on you the moment you step inside. From here, you move into the caldarium, the hot room. The temperature rises sharply. You feel sweat begin to bead instantly. The heat is oppressive, but this is what softens the skin. The walls sweat with you, condensation running down the tiles. It is not silent. Men groan, sigh, whisper, and even sing. You might sit by the large basin, the labrum, filled with hot water. If you are lucky, you can scoop some with your hands, or with a small bowl, and let it pour down your arms. But remember, this water is communal. Now it's time to apply oil. You pour a little into your hand. It's slightly sticky, faintly sweet in scent, but not enough to mask the reality of so many human bodies in close contact. You rub it across your skin. Then the scraping begins. It is not painful exactly, but it is not soothing either. The strigil tugs a little. It pulls fine hairs. You feel slightly raw by the end. Still, it is cleansing in its own way. Then comes the frigidarium, the cold plunge. A deep pool of chilled water meant to shock the system. You steel yourself, step in, The cold wraps around you instantly, and your breath catches. The room echoes with splashes and muttered curses. This completes the process. If you are wealthy, you might dry off with fine cloth. If not, you pat yourself with a worn towel and hope the sun will do the rest. You might stay to chat or have a massage. You might listen to a philosopher or a poet. Or you might simply dress again and return to the heat of the street, already sweating once more. But here's the part that might surprise you. This experience, unpleasant as it may seem, is also central to Roman life. People come here almost daily. For some, it's the only place to clean themselves. For others, it is their social stage. Deals are struck, favors are asked, arguments flared. And the bathhouse is not always equal. Men and women bathe separately, not always at the same time, and not always in the same facilities. Some bathhouses welcome women only in the morning. Some restrict them entirely. Slaves are ever present, tending fires, fetching water, massaging sore muscles. But they do not bathe unless permitted. And those who can't afford the coin do not bathe at all. So if you think of this as a spa, think again. It is hot, crowded, murky, loud, unfiltered, and unavoidable. The rhythm of your Roman life would beat to the pulse of these bathhouses. You'd go because you must, and leave not feeling refreshed, but at least a little less grimy than before. The slave who nearly burned Rome. The story of Epictetus. Before philosophy. Now that your skin is oiled and scraped, and your senses are still adjusting from the heat and chatter of the Roman bathhouse, let us drift further inward, into the life of one quiet figure whose beginnings were buried in chains and silence. A man not born into greatness, but into slavery. His name was Epictetus. You may know him now as a philosopher, a stoic, a sage, quoted in books and classrooms. But long before he spoke about serenity, he lived among the shadows of power, not as a senator, not as a citizen, but as someone's property. Imagine yourself now in the great city of Rome, somewhere in the middle of the 1st century CE. The empire is at its height. Marble glimmers in the sun. Aqueducts bring water over miles. Senators in white togas make solemn speeches in the forum. But behind these stone facades, far from public view, is the world of the enslaved, invisible, essential, and everywhere. Epictetus was born into this world, somewhere in what is now modern-day Turkey. He was enslaved as a child, transported across the sea, and eventually ended up in the household of Epaphroditus, a freedman of Emperor Nero himself. Epaphroditus was powerful, ruthless, and very much feared. As a boy, Epictetus was not given lessons in freedom or logic. He was given orders, tasks, chores. He likely slept near the kitchen or by the door, listening to the sounds of Rome as it settled at night. The drip of water, the creak of beams, the far-off laughter of those who had never known servitude. There is a story, half history, half memory, that tells us his master once crushed Epictetus's leg in a cruel display of authority. "If you keep twisting it," the boy is said to have told him, "you'll break it," and the master did. From that day on, Epictetus walked with a limp. It is said without bitterness, just as fact, And that is what sets his story apart, because somewhere amid the routines of servitude, the scrubbing of floors, the fetching of wine, the silent enduring of abuse, Epictetus began to think. He observed. He listened. Rome was full of philosophers in those days, wandering the porticos, arguing in slow circles. Stoicism was already in the air, the belief that one should seek harmony with nature, remain unmoved by fortune, and endure suffering with quiet strength. Perhaps in odd moments between duties, Epictetus found fragments of their speech, or perhaps his master, intrigued by the boy's mind, allowed him to study. Eventually, he did study, under the Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus, a man who believed that philosophy was not about talking, but about living rightly. It is not known whether this was by Epaphroditus's indulgence or a rare act of generosity. What we do know is that Epictetus, though still enslaved, absorbed these teachings fully. He learned not just to think, but to reshape his thinking. He was freed at some point, we do not know exactly when, likely after Nero's death, or perhaps after serving many years. What mattered is what he did with that freedom. He did not seek wealth. He owned nothing of value. No estate, no books, no golden ring. He did not write his own works. His student Arrian did that later. Instead, Epictetus opened a small school in a town called Nicopolis in western Greece. There he taught, quietly, calmly, to those who would listen. His teachings did not shout, they whispered. They did not urge ambition, they urged peace. He taught that we should focus only on what is within our control, our thoughts, our reactions, our intentions. Everything else, illness, death, pain, fame, wealth, is external, and to chase them is to enslave oneself again. He would say, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Can you see the thread? A boy in chains, a broken leg, years spent serving power. But instead of bitterness, he found clarity. Instead of rebellion, he found detachment. Not because he was weak, but because he had seen the inside of the cage and knew the shape of freedom from within. Epictetus lived simply. He taught for many years. He may have had a small family, though little is known. What matters is the calmness of his message, one that echoes now over 2,000 years later. So if you lie in bed tonight, heavy with thoughts or restless from the world, remember this quiet man with the damaged leg who once lived in Rome's marble maze, and who found peace not in escaping hardship, but in mastering the self. And with that, we leave Epictetus behind. Our journey next will take us into the shadows of Pompeii, not the bustling city as it was in life, but the silence that came after. The skeletons of Herculaneum, what we found in the boathouses. Let us turn now from philosophy to silence, from lives lived to lives interrupted. We move to a town smaller than Pompeii, yet intimately tied to its fate. Nestled at the base of Mount Vesuvius along the western coast of Italy, the town of Herculaneum sat quietly by the sea. Its streets were shaded, its homes large and well-appointed, its people, many of them, prosperous. And then, one day in 79 CE, the mountain changed everything. Vesuvius did not roar all at once. It began with a column of ash. Most people in Herculaneum, so the story goes, had time. Some fled inland, others waited. And some, perhaps hoping for rescue by boat, made their way to the waterfront. There, on the edge of town, were a series of stone boathouses, open-ended storage bays tucked into the seafront. They would have been used for fishing gear, small boats, and repair tools. But on that day, they became a final refuge. It wasn't until nearly 2,000 years later, in the 1980s and 1990s, that archaeologists discovered what truly lay within them. They were excavating carefully. The volcanic material was thick and compacted, but it preserved everything with astonishing precision. Under layers of hardened mud and pyroclastic flow, they found bones. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. In total, the skeletons of over 300 people were discovered huddled in the boat chambers and along the shoreline. They had waited there, sadly, likely believing they were safe, likely expecting ships to arrive. But the eruption did not follow their plan. What reached them was not ash, but a surge of superheated gas and debris, a pyroclastic flow. It moved fast, faster than a person could run, and it was hot enough to kill instantly. The people in the boathouses never stood a chance. And yet, their final moments were preserved. As archaeologists examined the scene, a kind of story emerged, not loud or dramatic, but quietly human. There was a woman lying beside a child, her arm extended protectively. There was a man with a small satchel, perhaps containing his most valuable possessions. Some had jewelry still clinging to bone. Others had sandals, pouches, small tools. One skeleton, now known as the ring lady, still wore gold bracelets and rings, one clutching a small key. What door she had hoped to return to, we do not know. There was a soldier, too, identified by his leather belt and weapons, preserved by the heat and ash. Perhaps he was trying to maintain order. Or perhaps he was simply fleeing like everyone else. But it was not just who they were. It was how they had arranged themselves. Some were sitting, some curled in fetal positions. Some appeared to be comforting one another. The youngest was just a baby. The oldest, a woman of perhaps 70 years. The volcanic heat, when it came, was instantaneous. The bodies did not burn slowly. They were overtaken in a single breath. It was, in a strange way, peaceful. Their features were gone, but their postures remained. And with them, a question still lingers. Why had they stayed? Was it faith in the Roman naval rescue? A lack of urgency? Were they told to shelter and wait? Or had they simply run out of time? Even more mysterious is how well the town itself was preserved. Herculaneum, unlike Pompeii, was entombed in mud rather than ash. As a result, organic material, wood, food, even cloth, survived. There are still beds in houses, boats on shore, bread in ovens. Entire shelves of scrolls were carbonized, but not destroyed. These remnants offer glimpses into daily life, the quiet rituals of bathing, eating, writing. And just beneath them, the final evidence of a moment when everything stopped. Today, if you walk through the ruins of Herculaneum, you may feel a strange quiet. Not eerie, just hushed. The streets are narrow, the mosaics still gleam, and down by the sea, the boathouses remain. They are empty now, though traces of the skeletons and their impressions are still visible in some areas. Visitors come and go, their voices bouncing off the stone. But the story stays still, waiting. In a way, the people of Herculaneum did not vanish. They waited by the sea, and now they wait in history. A quiet testament to how life can shift from routine to ruin in a moment, and how, even in death, the small details endure. A child's bracelet, a wooden box, a key. And so we leave them now, respectfully, and return from the ash to the avenues of power. Let us ascend the Palatine Hill, where Rome's rulers once dined in silk, watched, feared, and whispered about. A gentle glide from the shadowed ruins of Herculaneum to the perfumed luxury of Rome's imperial court. Dining with emperors, decadence and poison at the Roman table. Now, imagine the scent of rosemary and honey drifting through the air. Warm oil lamps flicker on carved walls. A long, low couch awaits your reclined form, and beside you, trays of food so elaborate they resemble sculptures more than meals. This is not the market stall, not the laborer's tavern. This is the triclinium, the Roman dining room of the wealthy, and tonight, you dine with emperors. The elite of ancient Rome lived lives profoundly unlike the rest. They awoke not to barking dogs or dusty stairs, but to courtyards with fountains, gardens trailing with ivy, and silk cushions plumped by silent servants. Every corner of their lives was curated, every smell, every sound designed to signal luxury. And nowhere was this more apparent than at the table. Dining for a Roman aristocrat or emperor was not simply about eating. It was about status, ritual, performance, a chance to be seen, admired, envied, and feared. You would not sit upright. You would recline on your left side, propped up by cushions facing the center of the room. The cena, or dinner, would begin late in the day and last for hours. The courses came in waves. First, the gustatio, or starter, perhaps eggs with honey and fish sauce, cold vegetables steeped in vinegar, oysters, spiced wine. Nothing too filling, just enough to whet the appetite. Then the prima mensa, the main meal. This could be elaborate beyond imagining. Roasted peacock with its feathers reattached, dormice stuffed with herbs and nuts, flamingo tongues, pheasant eggs, fish served in intricate layers of sauce, sweet, salty, sour, all at once. The Emperor Elagabalus, it is said, once served an entire meal made only of tongues. Nightingale tongues, flamingo tongues, peacock tongues. Whether true or not, the story speaks to the culture's extravagant appetite, not just for food, but for spectacle. And finally, the secunda mensa, or dessert. Honey cakes, dates stuffed with pine nuts, fruits soaked in wine, and perhaps a rare treat, snow imported from the mountains mixed with syrup, a Roman ancestor of gelato. But it wasn't just food on the table, it was tension. For even here, in this world of golden goblets and perfumed air, power could be fragile. Emperors feared assassination. The more decadent the setting, the more dangerous the company. It was said that Augustus once dined with a dagger beneath his pillow. Claudius, cautious by nature, employed food tasters for every course. And Domitian? He dined in black rooms with black-clad servants. Making guests to dine with an emperor meant navigating invisible lines, saying enough, but not too much, laughing but not too loudly, asking for nothing, giving constant thanks. And yet, for all its formality, the Roman banquet had a rhythm. Slaves moved quietly between courses, musicians played soft lyre songs, poets might recite verses, a guest might be invited to improvise a toast. Conversation drifted from politics to philosophy, then back to gossip. Who had fallen out of favor? Whose villa was more lavish? Who had been seen leaving the bathhouse too early? This was the empire's private theater. And through it all, one constant remained: abundance. The Roman elite lived surrounded by richness, not just in material things, but in time. They had time to recline, to linger, to be entertained, time to eat slowly, to sip wine spiced with herbs and resin, time to ponder, plot, or simply drift in thought. Contrast that with the poor, whose meals were brief, often cold, and sometimes eaten standing. A bowl of porridge, a crust of bread, a cup of sour wine. For the wealthy, food was not nourishment, it was art, identity, power. But even this came at a cost. Those who dined at the emperor's table were rarely safe. One false word could mean exile, one careless joke a charge of treason. Even the food itself was suspect. Poisonings, though rare, were feared. Some wore amulets, others drank antidotes before the meal began, and still some fell. And so, imagine it now, the laughter a little too forced, the clinking of cups just slightly delayed, eyes that watch, always watching, across platters of honeyed boar and bowls of scented snow. And yet, amidst all of that, there was beauty too. The glow of lamps, the quiet joy of a sweet fig, the murmuring of poets reciting Virgil or Ovid, the breathless hush as the next course is unveiled, a swan in pastry, or a fish that appears to leap from a sculpted sea. It is a world of layers, sweetness, power, fear, comfort, all folded into the fabric of a single, endless evening. And so, as the candles burn low, the guests murmur farewells, the plates are cleared, the couches are empty once more. Outside, the stars blink quietly over Rome, indifferent to luxury or labor. Somewhere, a senator dreams of power, a soldier dreams of home, and a philosopher dreams of nothing at all. And now we return. From warm stone floors and steaming caldariums, from quiet scribes and breathless boathouses, from philosophers who limped and emperors who feasted. History is rarely quiet in the books. It's full of noise and spectacle. But if you listen more softly, it has a rhythm, a slower beat, one of footsteps on dusty roads, spoons in clay bowls, voices echoing off marble halls. That is the rhythm we've followed tonight, not of battles, but of breath, not of glory, but of being. So let your eyes grow heavier now. Let the echoes of Rome grow faint. You are not in the bathhouse anymore. You are not dining with emperors. You are here, in stillness, in comfort, and sleep is near.